Ready to talk about innovation that's changing the world and meet the people that are making it happen? Welcome to the Global Code Podcast.
Here, we go beyond the buzzwords, beyond the headlines to uncover the real stories behind technology's global impact.
From AI to clean tech, blockchain to biotech, we are exploring innovations that matter and talking to pioneers driving change in every corner of the world with a focus on people, purpose, and possibility.
Wondering how AI and emerging technologies will shape your future?
Yeah, we're wondering that too.
So we are asking the boldest thinkers and builders we can find.
Come with us on this journey into the heart of innovation across borders and boundaries.
This is Global Code.
Tech for everyone,
Everywhere.
I would like to introduce Ashutosh Rao. He's an engineering leader based out of Bangalore, India, with an extensive experience in cloud security and AI-driven network analytics. Currently, he's working for Palo Alto Networks, which is a premier cybersecurity organization. He leads cloud security platforms where he spearheads the development of cutting-edge applications and data pipelines for cloud-delivered malware and threat detection systems. His work focuses on advancing functional capabilities to counter new and sophisticated malware threats while ensuring the delivery of top-tier cloud platforms for malware detection, threat prevention, and AI runtime security services. Welcome, Ashutosh. And as a fun fact, I wrote it was uh, I was delighted to learn that you did 10 European countries in 3 weeks. So, you know, tell us something about that.
Hey, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this. Super excited to have a conversation about everything that's AI and cybersecurity. Yeah. So the fun fact, it was a gloomy summer for me. I was alone in Germany, and all of my colleagues went for a vacation in summer, as they do in Europe. That's the first thing that they plan. I didn't have a plan, so what I did was I just picked up my backpack. Said, let me see where the bus takes me. So walked up to the bus station, checked into the earliest bus that was available. It went on to Brussels, and then from there, after a day or so, I went on to other countries and kept doing that until I ran out of money, enough to bring me back home. So it was actually less than 3 weeks though, but yeah, that was an adventure because it was a very minimal expense, very low key, true backpack that someone could do. It was quite fun, and it was back in the day when I was really young. Can't think of that now.
I love that, Ashutosh. Just that spirit of adventure. And I feel like, to your point, kind of as we get older and more attached to, I don't know, our wallets and our phones and things like that, it becomes harder and harder to conceive of doing things like that. But I have a similar college story we'll have to share after
Awesome.
the podcast.
Yeah.
And she's did just a great job running down your background and your bio and things like that, talking about just malware and threat intelligence. But it seems like it's kind of impossible to talk about threat intelligence without also talking about the dark web. And so for our listeners and just for their information and education, do you mind just breaking it down a little bit? What is the dark web? What are people talking
Sure.
about
So,
there?
so in very simple terms, the internet is kind of divided into surface web and the dark web. So surface web essentially is what we browse, what we use for Google and stuff. So everything that we do right now, which is legit on the internet, it's the surface web. It's easy to access. There are no restrictions. There are no guardrails. On the other hand, dark web is a highly restricted area in the internet, which is secured by a lot of guardrails, a lot of internet restrictions, purely because of the intentions of the actors that reside on the dark web. Right. So dark web, and the dark part of it comes because that is essentially the playground for any bad actor or any actor who wants to essentially either sell content that they have hacked into and pulled out of the surface web or different areas around the world, or they want to talk about any malicious intent they have and have conversations with other bad actors to see whether the tech that they're going to use is right or not, and so on. So the actors that reside on the dark web essentially have dark intent, and that's why that's called dark web. And it's not easily accessible, extremely restricted. There are subscriptions and forums and multiple levels of security and authentication that prevent, firstly, folks who are trying to get people out of the dark web or detect who are in the dark web out, and secondly, to ensure that they remain anonymous as much as possible.
Thank you for that. It's interesting. I feel that there's kind of this whole sub operation of actors and things like that that most folks aren't are probably even aware of, and it's really your entire world, that there are literally folks out here with malicious intent. And so when we think about the dark web and those things, can you share what type of data or insights are typically gathered there, and how it plays into your overall strategy of preventing cyber threats more generally?
Yeah. So to kind of explain the kind of data that's there, we need to kind of take a step back and look at what malicious intent and bad actors actually are. So if you look at cybersecurity in general, or if you look at security in general, it's essentially trying to protect something. And cybersecurity is a subdomain out of that, which is essentially trying to protect assets. And when you look at multiple levels and facets of asset that companies or enterprises or people want to protect, all kind of boils down to data, right? It's your data, it's personal data, it's enterprise, it's company, corporate data, it's university data. There are multi levels and multiple domains that your data is sitting on, and all of that data is essentially what cybersecurity is trying to protect in different ways, in different scopes, but essentially boils down to data. Now, with that in mind, all malicious actors that have essentially intent to destroy or to leverage this data essentially sit on the dark web, most of them. Specifically the ones who want to sell this data, right? To give you a very simple example, let's say social security numbers for a certain county of residents has been leaked by certain. Let's say there's someone who's hacked into the county's databases. Now, if I have that information as a bad actor, the only two intent I would have is to destroy it for whatever personal vendetta that I would have with some person in that town, or the larger reason would be to extort money out of it, right? So essentially what that means is now I need to take that data and sell it to someone who would be interested in buying it. Now, I cannot sell that data in your regular web. I cannot go out there, put it on Google saying, hey, you know what, I have this data. Does someone want to buy it? Because of course, there's going to be someone who's monitoring it and I'm going to get caught. So the only reason that dark web exists is to create a safe haven for people like these who want to sell this data out and be completely anonymous about it. So what happens is when this data gets infiltrated and the data is now leaked by this bad actor, he's now going to go up to the dark web onto forums that he's aware of, where he could put this out for a bid, essentially. And there would be other malicious actors who would want to buy this data and essentially pay it out in money, in cash, or in bitcoins, or different forms of currency, right? So this dark haven kind of creates dark web creates a safe haven for people like these who want to take this data and extort money out of it.
Ashutosh, I really appreciate how you're laying out that, the cybersecurity world is looking at this from many different angles. And one of the questions that we have is, to really understand, like, how has AI fundamentally either evolved or shifted what you all are doing in the cybersecurity world, and what's keeping you up at night?
Oh, there's a lot keeping us at night. So cybersecurity, not just because I'm in that domain, but essentially that's what the world also is realizing over past, I think, 4 to 5 years now, since COVID and beyond, is cybersecurity has been the most evolving tech domain in terms of the kind of adversaries and threats that exist and the kind of technology that exists to counter them. It essentially is the most evolving domain in the world right now. And the reason for that is like you mentioned, AI is not just augmenting what malicious actors or bad actors have in terms of how they can infiltrate and hack into your systems, but also it's augmenting what cybersecurity vendors and companies and technology can do in terms of detecting this. So it's essentially a cat and mouse game. You have
Mm.
malicious actors and bad actors trying to use these high tech technologies, AI, machine learning, generative AI, to to use that in their advantage. And this same technology is now being used by cybersecurity companies to counter this threat. So it's essentially who's winning the race at what point of time decides what happens for every single threat that goes out there. Now, since you mentioned AI essentially has again evolved in the last, I'd say, 8 to 10 years. It started with a very small set of people who understood how AI is built, how they could leverage AI into their technology. And I'm talking about not the bad actors, but folks like us who are
Right.
in day-to-day lives, or companies and organizations and universities and so on. It's a very small group of people who understood it. And now cut to 2024 or 2023, when OpenAI kind of opened up their generative AI models, their large language models, that opened up a whole new facet, a whole new level and dimension to AI, which did not require a lot of domain understanding for people who want to use AI. Now, what I mean by that is that you don't need to understand how do you build these AI products, how do you use AI, because it's very simplified now due to these new generative AI models. Anybody could use AI for any kinds of act. Could be malicious or it could. Now, what that means essentially is, as AI is simplifying its usage, the scope at which AI can be used for malicious intent has blown up. Right? To give you a simple example, there was this is a live use case. This came from one of our discussions. Essentially, there was a company that said after OpenAI went live, and everybody is in this race to get generative AI used into their products, to their organization at multiple levels. So there was this one company that went up to their CISO, and then went down the chain and said, "Hey, can you use generative AI for looking through all our tech documents and kind of make an assistant, an AI assistant, a chatbot that can help folks who want to ask questions around our product. Could be an internal, it could be an external application that you build." Now, what happened is with the invent of OpenAI and models, um, every engineer who wanted to do that, every employee of the company that wanted to build that, opened up the entire documentation to an external entity that would access this data. And this entity sat outside the guardrails of their company. So all this data is now being sent to an ecosystem that is completely dark, completely black box for folks like you and me. And what it spits out is brilliant. It kind of gives you an amazing AI assistant. So the outcome is really awesome. What people don't realize is you're now gone out of the, and it's become so easy that nobody's now going to think about these guardrails. They're going to say, you know what, the end means are great. I don't care about how the path to it is, and that is very scary. So what's keeping up cybersecurity companies right now is essentially how do you how do you how do you give this knowledge to organizations, to universities, on firstly how do you build the guardrails so that you understand what problems exist when you start using AI, and what kind of cybersecurity threats exist every single step that you take with your data. And along with that, the race in cybersecurity is to build products that can help companies, organizations, universities not worry a lot about how do they do it themselves. Give them products that can secure their environment when they want to start adopting AI, when they want to start adopting machine learning, Gen AI, and so on. Right. So this race is essentially against a lot of surface knowledge of people about AI and opening up the domain of AI to folks who have an easy access to the entire machine learning world and the entire LLM world without having to worry about what happens to my. So that's what's kind of the race, right?
Well, what's interesting about that, and just made me think about this, is I think there are some statistics that say there's going to be like about 300 million in spending by companies to procure AI solutions. And so one of the things that I'm really curious about from your perspective is when you're going to spend money on bringing in AI solutions, then how much money should you be spending on risk assessment? And some of what you're talking about is about risk assessment, right? Where do we need to understand the threats? How do we know that we're buying something from a company that is legitimate, that is not operating, in untoward ways? So I feel like that in itself is such a huge learning curve, and that's what I'm hearing
Yeah,
you say. Is that
absolutely. Yeah.
right?
So that's a great question, actually. So the focus on a CISO's role in organizations has again evolved over time. A CISO had a very simple rule book 4 to 5 years ago that these are the things that you should look at in your organization. These are the measures you should take. These are the technology that you should be aware of, and so on. It's quite easy. Of course, I'm not going to simplify the role, but what has happened essentially over time is now that domain has evolved so much. Now, like you said, there's a lot of awareness gaps between what exists and what kind of technology they can adopt versus what could happen when they adopt. So what is now going on from cybersecurity companies and a lot of augmented cybersecurity companies? So essentially, I looked up a stat recently that there are about 2,000 cybersecurity companies being funded every year. 2,000. And not all of them are in the domain of protection or helping organizations to protect or set these guardrails. A lot of them are doing exactly like you asked. They are educating, they are building policies, they are explaining the ecosystem to organizations so that they can take an educated decision on what vendors they can trust, what technology they can trust, what kind of guardrails do they need to set after they trust these. So there are different domains of cybersecurity. A lot of them are not going into the protection space or helping customers protect themselves. They're going into the space of cybersecurity. So that helps. That helps companies like ours because we are building solutions that will help them protect it. But a lot of time, our conversations with customers are essentially hitting a dead block because they are not understanding some of the threats that we're trying to. And it goes essentially to your question. They don't understand it. So a lot of companies are trying to claim these threats to them so that companies like us can help them solve those problems.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashutosh. Yeah, let me switch gears a little bit. You and I both have been in cybersecurity for quite some time now. I'm curious to know, and you did a great job of like giving us the lay of the land and like diving into key details where needed. So maybe we'll try to do something similar here where, you know, you have been in the cybersecurity industry in India for a long time, but you have US based clients, so you also have the US perspective. So let's start with like how cybersecurity awareness has differed or evolved between India and the US over the years. We'll start there, but then eventually you are specifically right now, as I understand it, in the education domain. So it'd be good to see like also how like the education, like institutions in the educational domain have also been thinking about cybersecurity in the past few years, right? Because when I was in India and we were in college together. Back then, like nobody
Yeah.
nobody really cared about cybersecurity, right? So I'm curious to know like what the state of
Sure.
affairs is today.
Yeah. So I'll start with the education side and then we'll go like how different is cybersecurity perception between countries like India, the developing countries versus the developed countries, right? So from the education side, so last year I had the opportunity to visit a university, uh, and they invited me to talk generally about cybersecurity, about what cybersecurity trends are, similar to what kind of conversations we're having right now. And the one thing that I observed, um, when I looked at the students there, the faculty and the curriculum, is what amazed me is cybersecurity is now a major in India for students who are studying undergrad and a more specialized cybersecurity major when they're doing their. Now, what that means essentially is we've gone from, like you mentioned, the standard run-of-the-mill sections of engineering and technology growing up, and this paradigm shift has happened very recently. So we've gone from there to now where we have specializations in a domain which not a lot of people understand, even when they are experienced technology leaders. They don't understand it. So now, when you have a new age of young uh, kids coming out of colleges, understand the absolute essence of cybersecurity, and you get them into companies who are into cybersecurity, they bring in a very good foundation of what they need to understand when they get into this. So now what happened is when they come into the organizations which are specializing in cybersecurity, they have a foundation that's already helping them understand what they need to do and what their role is going to be. And that is great because we were at a time, maybe 3 or 4 years back, where, and Ashish, you would know this as well because you've been in this domain for a while, that you had to start educating a lot of folks on what cybersecurity is and specifically what domain they would be working in. So, and then you start picking it up from there, getting the specializations and their roles, and then the value they bring in is going to take a while. That has changed now. Now they come in with a foundational understanding of what cybersecurity is, what kind of domains exist in them, and this is specifically what kind of work I'm going to be doing. And that's great. That's great because there is no bias, and they understand that they bring in fresh perspective that maybe we don't. We won't have it because they're young. They would have learned to learn about it while they study, so on. We have an industry understanding about it. We're going to be looking at it from a customer space. We're going to be looking at it from an enterprise space. They come in from educational backgrounds. They have read books that we probably haven't read. So it's a great time to be in right now. This is in India, which was a surprise. Now, along with that, what has also happened is sticking to education. Companies are also starting to train employees in specializations of cybersecurity, which again did not exist a few years. Specializations of trainings of education within the organization were extremely technology specific. Like, for example, they would have trainings around machine learning, they would have trainings around AI, they would have trainings now around LLM and so on. But not a lot of folks wanted to venture into trainings around cybersecurity because, again, the domain was very specific and niche. They wanted to leave it to the experts. They didn't want to pull in a lot of folks into that domain. But that is changing as well, especially in organizations that are in cybersecurity or have been showing interest in building products. Now, going to the other question that you mentioned about how the paradigm has shifted between India and US, or how is it different between India and US? So India essentially, for lack of better words, is a little behind in terms of awareness of what data security means. So, like I mentioned at the start of this discussion, everything in cybersecurity is about data because every bad actor wants to get that data. Whatever they do, what kind of technology they use, they just need something out of that action, right? And that action more often is data, which essentially means the impacted organization or the impacted entity needs to understand that their data is at threat. And right now, India is still evolving, understanding that there is a threat to data and they need to protect it. That's first. And there is a further evolution required for them to understand what happens if that data is leaked. What happens if my data is falls in the hands of bad actors? That understanding is evolving, if I could call it that, and it hasn't got there. Now, like you mentioned, we are working with a lot of Western clients, and they dominate our customer space. And the reason for that is there's an evolved understanding of the threat. And when there's an evolved understanding of threat, these organizations are already walking up to us and saying, I understand this is going to be a problem for me. Going to the point that Salima mentioned around adoption of AI. And, I understand the threat that could be there. I'm not sure what all could happen, but I understand there's a threat. So I need your help in protecting my organization, my enterprise, my colleges, my campuses, so on. That discussion that we have is a little bit more evolved than what we would have in India. Our discussions that sales and folks who are into technical marketing are more towards education, like trying to explain what kind of threat exists, and then towards evolution of explaining what kind of prevention measures could exist, what products they could buy, what to trust and what. So that's a major difference, and it is evolving. But that journey from education to understanding, it takes a while, right? And I'm guessing it should be a couple of years until everybody's kind of aware, considering the entire geopolitical situation around the world that's going on. There's a lot of awareness that's coming in that something would happen. So that's one of the biggest differences. Now, once they understand that, the second problem that I mentioned about what happens if my data is leaked, that awareness is not there yet. A simple example. So India has something called as Aadhaar card, which is an SSN equivalent, right? So now what happens with that is India is in the process of linking that single number with everything in your ecosystem, in your life. It could be a bank account, it could be a taxation system, it could be your personal information, your properties, everything. Everything is linked to that one number. Now, the awareness is that, yes, this number is important. So this other number is very important. But the awareness is not evolved to a point that, hey, if this leaks, what's going to happen? So what happens very actively in India, and it is quite funny though, is people share their Aadhaar numbers and a photo of their card freely, right? So if I kind of text Ashish and say, hey, Ashish, I need your Aadhaar number, he's in India, he's just going to kind of take a screenshot and send it out to. And that's absolute basic awareness that is lacking. And that's not what happens in the West, right? So you kind of want to secure all of these things. In India, that awareness is not there because they do not understand that, hey, if this number goes to someone, there is a possibility if they are advanced in terms of technology, they could hack into my bank account. They could get money out of it, or they could just be lurking around to see what kind of transactions I'm doing and so on. That awareness is lacking.
Yeah, that's a good point actually, because when we started like our careers, I remember I was interested in cybersecurity, but there were like literally no universities which were teaching it back then. That's why I came to the US. US also didn't have much. Like I think cybersecurity for the US was mainly around like nation state actors and not really like, people ransomwaring organizations, which is pretty common now. But I think in India, I feel like US has had the internet for quite some time. I think in India, I feel like we skipped a phase where we went from not having internet to everybody having the mobile, and then everybody's connected to internet. So there was this shift where especially our parents who never had internet and to having everything on the internet. So that's why I guess people like kind of don't understand like the implications, and unfortunately like a lot of senior citizens in India are targeted, and money is siphoned off from their account, with like fake phishing scams, which are especially now more convincing with AI. But to move things to a lighter note, I just have to have this question, which many people have, right? Is it really like the movies? Is it like somebody says, "Hey, you know what? Hack this system," and then and then this super hacker comes in, types something for 5 seconds or 2 minutes on a command prompt, and suddenly that system is hacked, and suddenly they have access to everything. Is that how it works?
Yes and no. Maybe it kind of depends on, again, the kind of guardrails where you're hacking it. Of course, it's not as simple as they show it in the movies, but you know this as well. It is kind of the journey that happens. I think they skipped probably 4,000 steps in the middle in that entire journey from the start to finish. But it's not that easy. And we are lucky it's not that easy, right? Had it been that easy, it would have been a much difficult journey for us. It's not that easy because there are organizations which are protecting themselves under multiple layers of firewalls. So that's how cybersecurity evolved, right? 15 years back to now. Started with firewall, which is kind of this massive ecosystem that's protecting you inside a big block of iron, which means basically that nothing gets in, nothing gets out. It's evolved from there to extremely atomic security. Right? So hackers now cannot really say, I got it to command prompt, hey, I'm through this firewall, and now tell me what you want me to do. It's not that easy yet, thank God. But yes, the journey starts from there and gets to a point where they have to go through multiple levels of infiltration. And then finally, they get to a point where they can pull something out.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. And I know nothing against Indian banks or anything, but I have one bank account in India. And what's funny is I am the authorized user and I still find it difficult to sign in. So that's definitely a lot of security
Yes.
in place if the authorized person
Yeah.
can't sign in.
I
But
think
yeah.
I think we are in a phase of nothing should work to start with. And if you're smart enough, you will get something to work. Basically, we are at that point right now. Stop everything and then let them come. It's good. It's good that India is at least doing that.
Ashish, your money is very, very safe.
Safe even from me.
It's from your side.
Even from you. No, no reckless spending at all. Ashutosh, I just thank you so much. This is incredibly informative. My question really is going back just to the data awareness a little bit, and how being in this space, you think about the consumer level. So I feel like you've done just an amazing job illustrating that enterprise awareness and the difference in geographies in terms of enterprises and things like that. I feel like when we think about consumers, there's almost conflicting trajectories of understanding and awareness around the importance of data and privacy and things like that, where, people are somewhat aware, but then freely giving away their biometric information for the simplest things, quick to sign agreements, privacy agreements without actually reading and understanding. And so wondering how you think about that as a security professional, and if you see any geographic
Oh yeah,
differences there
that's
as
a
well.
great question actually. So security is a two-pronged problem right now. One is, like you mentioned, enterprises and large organizations and colleges and all of these large ecosystems. They understand the problem, and then there are the people element. The people element essentially is you and me. Now we are aware of this because when we work, we know that there are so many guardrails around us doing something wrong and letting our system open. But having said that, when we come out of that ecosystem and we are an individual, that even educated folks like us sometimes, like you said, sign agreements without reading through it. Just click on I agree and go through it. Share our biometrics. And something as simple as sharing a PDF with your bank statement as well, without not knowing that everything in that bank statement can be used against you. Right? A lot of these small measures and it is not done by individuals when it comes to the individual space. But when these individuals get into an ecosystem of a company or an organization, they are super aware. So there is this problem. The problem essentially means, hey, I understand that I have to be secure. I have to give security an importance, but I limit that to my work entity. I limit that to where I am supposed to secure it because the company mandate. But when it comes to personal space, those guardrails are down, and it's not just the elderly who are susceptible to it. It's us as well. To give a very simple example, in our organization, we have these random phishing tests where we would send out mails to all employees randomly, which looks so legitimate that even the most sophisticated cybersecurity professional would take a while to understand there is a small nuance here which hints that it's a phishing mail. So, what's a phishing mail essentially for those uninitiated is essentially a mail that has content that is very legitimate, looks very legitimate, but when you click on certain entities inside that links, they're going to lead you to a domain which is controlled by a malicious. Now that malicious actor is there are millions of ways they could kind of use that information against you, get into that domain, right? So phishing is currently the largest and the most widespread cybersecurity threat. And it's so simple. It's extremely simple to set up, extremely simple to fall prey. Yet in our organization, when this goes through, I myself, unfortunately, have fallen prey to it. I've just kind of looked at it. Example, right now it's bonus times. And then, you look at the mail that says, hey, this is your pay statement. You click it, boom. And then you get a mail from IT saying, hey, you know what? You clicked on something you shouldn't have. So that awareness essentially is, for some reason, not that clear. So that problem where organizations are doing so much to secure their ecosystem, and what people are doing at an entity level, at a human level, is far, far different. And that is a big problem. So what's happening, for example, is so one of the biggest areas of problems where cybersecurity is currently kind of infiltrating are smart vehicles. Almost all cars right now in the West, and I think India is also getting there, are connected vehicles, which essentially means there is this central server that's controlling everything around it. Teslas, right? There are updates flowing through, controlled by an entity. The control is more around data that's moving in telemetry, that's moving from the vehicles to the servers, and servers pushing information onto the vehicle. And people believe, you know what, that's fine. They're talking to each other. What's the big deal? But that is the most susceptible cybersecurity threat of it. It is very easy to hack into smart vehicles. And there are a lot of malicious actors who are trying to do that. I mean, some of them are just kind of playing around to kind of show what they know and so on. But something as simple as a car is now moving out of our control. We've gone from the keys to the gears to the steerings to the brakes. We've gone from there to a car which is completely controlled by an internal net. And that's a very scary aspect to be, right? When you know that there's a vehicle that you're driving that's not in your control. And something as small as that, at a very small level as one individual, is very threatening. So just to answer your question, like the difference of how we perceive security at an individual level versus how we perceive security when we are in an organization is widespread. It's not geographical, it's across the globe. It's the awareness is lacking in the West. It's also lacking in India as well. In India, I believe it's a larger problem, but it's a problem that's everywhere.
Let me jump in here, Sharan. Just one quick point, right? I mean, I don't want to put everything on the individuals as well. Sometimes it's difficult to discern what's going on. In corporates, you're kind of used to the kind of emails that you get. So, if something looks weird, it's, very easily identifiable. But in your personal life, right, like a recent example is like, you have this Facebook account, right? And suddenly one day your friend messages you, hey, I'm in trouble, something is happening, just, I need like X amount of money, or it's as simple as, hey, I am trying to go to or win this competition, can you click on this link and vote for me, right? So in those situations, there is that inherent trust that you have in your friend which is being exploited, right? So it's very difficult, in my opinion, to say, hey, individuals uh, you know can easily identify if they are being like targeted.
No, I appreciate that. I think just two things. So just one point of clarification. And when we receive these emails, because I feel like at this point everyone has, right? Whether it's the, hey, save some money on car insurance, or let me show you how to do this, or the one I've been getting most recently is, oh, this is UPS or FedEx, and we're trying to get a package to you, and there's some problem with your address, so click here and fix it, right? So my first question to you is the issue simply clicking, or does that just take you to a gateway where they're asking for more information, and entering that information is the problematic part? So that's the first question. And then the second part of this question is, for our listeners who are sitting home, probably a little bit more scared than they were when they started this podcast, how can they make themselves just more aware and more in tune, and prepare themselves to be able to confront these things and avoid them if they come
That's
across?
a great question. So let's talk examples, right? The FedEx example. It's in India that threat is so big right now that I think the recent statistics show that overall people have lost millions in purely FedEx, which basically says either FedEx is calling you or dropping you an email or dropping you a text saying, hey, your package is stuck at the customs, pay this much, otherwise the package is not going to come through. So the first question around what, is there something there that I click and I'm done? It's not. It's not that simple. Essentially, that takes you to there could be multiple ways of exploitation. One could be essentially, let's take the FedEx example. When you click on it, it's going to take you to a page that looks legit FedEx. Then you look at it and it has FedEx logos everywhere. It looks like it's FedEx. And it's going to ask you information very subtly that is not something that you would fill in when you're trying to get a FedEx package home. There would be something there that you would not realize you're filling in, which should make you sit back and think, is this something that FedEx would really ask? And those subtle nuances is what they're preying on. Right? They are exploiting. Are you noticing that first? Right? So it's not the click that is the problem. It is essentially what it leads you to. And what it leads you to is where your awareness needs to. So if it was just click, you could always look at the content and say, you know what, I'm not, the language doesn't sound like something FedEx might. Right? Could start with that. Or the link that is there that does not look like something FedEx would. Right. So awareness at that level is the first step. You look at it and say, you know what, I shouldn't be clicking at all, which is why all awareness campaigns say stop clicking, because once you click, there are so many ways of exploitation that they cannot educate you on every single level of exploitation. So they have to start with and probably stop at simply saying, do not click. Don't take the first step, because we cannot control what happens. Right. So the education starts there. Now, once you click on that, like you asked, what happens next? You go to multiple different domains, and their exploitations are so subtle that you don't realize they're really exploited. And those are phishing websites. There's something called wishing as well, where they would call you and they would basically say, hey, I'm calling you from the customs. Are you blah, blah, blah? And they say, yeah, that's who I am. And, you got a package coming in from the US and it is this dollar amount. They haven't paid the customs. You'll have to pay it. Otherwise, it will be sent back. And a lot of times people don't even take a step back and say, hey, am I even expecting a FedEx? Right? Am I really expecting something? Okay. If I am expecting something, would it happen that the person sending me is not going to be paying the customs? Right? So there are so many levels of awareness that exist, that the first step is kind of the only place that everybody starts giving you awareness, saying, hey, don't even click, don't even pick that phone call, don't even answer it. Or if you answer it and you find something suspicious, don't say anything, just cut the call. Right? So that is where everybody's stopping in terms of awareness. It's not easy. It's not easy to secure people in terms of awareness, because there's multifaceted.
Ashutosh, I feel like to Dan's point, we've gone down deep into the dark web with you. And what I want to do is pull us up as we're about to come to the end of our episode together. One of the things that we talk a lot about on this podcast, is, how has, AI really opened up the possibility for people to come up with solutions who maybe wouldn't have normally had that access or that opportunity in the past. And so is there a version of cybersecurity that is positive, that's really about, how do we expand benefits to the world and have a cybersecurity lens that's not, yes, I know a lot of what you do is about threat, and sometimes I wonder about how you stay optimistic, because I want to know that. How do you stay optimistic, knowing what you know and seeing what you see? But what's the other version? Is there another version of this where people are like, yeah, cybersecurity is actually my friend, and it's going to allow me to do all kinds of amazing things in the world?
So, there's a lot of positives to it. Like, Ashish, you can also kind of fill in. So there's something called red teaming and blue teaming. I won't go into details, but there are basically people who are trying to be malicious or kind of enact what a malicious actor would do. And there are also people who are doing ethical hacking. And that essentially means they are trying to generate a ecosystem where you're trying to preempt the kind of threats that could happen. right? Which means there are good guys as well who are trying to do this for protecting the people. When it comes to AI, uh, a lot of products, a lot of work that is going on right now is to secure usage of AI by customers or by individuals, right? So, like I said, when OpenAI came up with their large language models, and now Google has got their own, or there are many companies that are coming up with their own. Now, what happens with that is everybody wants to use it, and they want this to be secure. So now there's this aspect of not showing the threats to the organization, not throwing threats to individuals, saying, "Hey, you know what? This is scary. Don't do this. Don't do that." That's a part that's already going on. Right? There's a lot of fear mongering around. Like you said, it's scary. It's scary word. But what we are also going towards is as a positive narration. And positive narration is, hey, you know what? Go ahead and use it. We're going to give you something that's going to secure this entire ecosystem for you, so that you can leverage AI as much as possible. It's easier said than done. But what that also means is that at every step of the way, you're going to secure how your data is transitioning from where your secure environment is until outside that guardrails to the AI ecosystem, which is going to use that data. So that's the positive aspect we are giving people. Where a lot of organizations in cybersecurity are saying, go ahead and use AI. We are not going to say don't do it. Go ahead and use it. This is how you can secure it. We are here to help you. And that's the good part. The narration, of course, started with saying, hey, you know what, stop using AI, they're going to take over the world, so on. And while they do that, they have access to your car, like I mentioned. There are scary examples. But now we have moved on to narration where we cannot stop this. It's a ball that's rolling and it's picked up speed, and traction is so much thanks to generative AI. We cannot go with the narration of fear. We have to go with the narration of positivity. We say, go ahead and use it. But we're going to tell you how to secure your environment. Now we are there. We're actually in that area.
And so what are you hopeful for? Like, final question. I mean, what's getting you excited? Because this is what I want to know now is like,
Yeah. So what's
yeah, I know it's keeping you up at night, but what's
yeah?
getting you
So
excited?
the exciting part keeping me up at night is the fact that there's so much technology in AI that is being adopted by customers, by people, by individuals. Like, for example, every app that you use, behind that is AI. Every single application used in a mobile is driven by AI. We are not aware of it. So what's exciting is there's so much that people need to secure themselves on, and they need to be aware of the kind of ecosystem they're going to be talking to. And that is exciting because AI is bringing in so many avenues of technology being adopted in your day-to-day lives, that adds the aspect of security to it. That, hey, I want my blender to be smart, for example. I want it to be super intelligent. It needs to understand I'm putting in avocados in, so it needs to blend only this much, versus if I'm putting in coconuts in that much. So that smartest I want it. So that's exciting. But there's also going to be another exciting world around it. Says, I'm going to secure this for you so that nobody is going to be able to hack into it and start blending while your fingers in there, right? So that's the exciting part, that every evolution that technology is going through every 6 to 8 months, there's always a cybersecurity evolution that is trying to protect technology. And that is great because that kind of filling my pocket.
So you're gonna be busy forever, basically, is what that means. You're not losing your job, neither is Ashish. Wonderful. And
Yeah.
we want to thank you so much for coming on and laying out this world of cybersecurity for us. I think it's really important because sometimes it can be like Ashish said, like the movies, you're kind of sitting around as an individual saying, oh, but like there's some kind of hacker sitting next door to me, maybe 5 houses down the road doing X, Y, and Z, and I can't do anything about that, But I think what you've also said is that there's a role that we can all play in this. Obviously, we have the expertise of all of you, but then we as individuals also have a role to play in securing ourselves and our data. And the technology that we use going forward. So we really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to talking to you again at some point to talk about the next evolution of cybersecurity and AI.
Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation. A lot of my conversations so far have been so technology driven, where we're trying to explain solutions, that it's difficult to take a step back and explain the root of the problem. This was great. I love having this talk. Thank
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Ashutosh.
you.
Take
This was
care.
awesome.
All right, everyone. So here we are for our jam session after talking to Ashutosh about data security and cybersecurity. So, what do you both think? Where did your minds go hearing him talk? Besides being completely and utterly terrified, what are you taking away from this?
So for me, Salima, I'm in the field, so I resonate with everything that Ashutosh said.
Yes.
One thing I would like to emphasize, though, is that there was a point in the conversation where we talked about like individual responsibility,
Yes.
and sometimes it's difficult to actually do that.
Mm.
You at the end of the day, like I think security professionals or even the industry says, hey, security is everybody's responsibility. But sometimes it's really difficult, specifically when there is an inherent trust, right? Like for example,
Mhm.
somebody on Facebook reaches out to you that you have known for a long time. You have really no way of knowing that that person's
Right.
account was hacked unless the message is somewhat weird, which attackers are getting better at
Yeah.
impersonating these days, especially with AI in the picture. And another thing, I that kind of brought to or that came to mind during the discussion was sometimes we are just too busy, right? I was talking to somebody the other day about user behavior analytics, and they say that usually people make mistakes when they are really busy, right? Like they're like, okay, I just want to complete this task and move on, like and that is when we are most vulnerable, where you're just like trying to get the stuff done so that you can get on your way, so to speak. So that's what I really wanted to emphasize, and that was my takeaway.
I like that. I like that, Ashish. I think to Salima, your point, the information that we just got is sobering. And everyone knows that there are people out there who are trying to take advantage of folks. I think when you think about the depth of it and the lengths that people will go to, that there are really some bad actors out there. I think I'm not dissuaded or dismayed by the overall message though, because I feel like Ashutosh gave us some really powerful but simple things that we can do to better protect ourselves as users of data and users of technology. Just being aware when something feels off, when that email just doesn't seem quite right, taking that extra beat and pausing. And I love that illustration that he used, that at work we tend to be really careful with information and privacy, and then we kind of switch that part of our brains off when we come home and we're just dealing it with ourselves. And so just taking that breath, and to your point, Ashish, just not being so busy that we're being careless with our data and our information. I don't know, Slim. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the ubiquity of technology is, like it's everywhere. It's everywhere, which means that the threat is also everywhere, right? That I think is something, and I don't say that to, be scary, but what I'm saying is that with technology comes a whole host of things, right? And part of the job of people who build technology, of course, is to keep that in mind and build technology with that in mind. And we talk a lot about that on this podcast. But I think for consumers or for users, there's also the sort of the responsibility of saying, I shouldn't take for granted that my phone is right next to me and it can do a million things, but rather it can do a million things, which means it could also do things that could be harmful. Right. And it's hard to keep those things together all the time, hold those things up together because to both of your points, we get lost in our day to day. Right. And we start to take technology for granted. So I think that he was really raising that to all of us, that it is every day. Like, for example, his point that now, self-driving technology is one of the biggest threats that we have because of the way that the data gets transferred, and I would have never thought about that. I would have taken that for granted. Um, if I got into some kind of, a self-driving taxi, I wouldn't have worried, but now I'm like, "Oh, yes, no, there's something more happening here behind the scenes that I'm not paying attention to." So that can be a lot for the average person, right? But I think that there needs to be more public attention around the sort of relationship with technology that I think is more complicated than we realize on a day to day. And then the other thing I was just gonna add is I really appreciated his, perspective about sort of the global dimension of how we think about security and the differences between, like, India, for example, and North America, and, the ways in which countries and societies and the public are even aware of things like personal data and how that's gonna get used or not used, and how in some cultures, like, exchanging personal data, and you were talking about this earlier, Ashish, like, exchanging personal data, not a big deal, no one thinks about it twice, right? Whereas here, if somebody asks for your social security number, I don't know about you, but my, like, antennas go up. I'm like, "Why do you want my social security number?" You know?
Absolutely.
So there are differences in terms of, I think how countries and nations are also responding to the security piece. And as AI becomes again more integrated into our daily lives and into the technologies that we use, I think again the threats rise, right? And so we have to start thinking about whether we're going to address those threats actively or not.
I think again, you made some amazing points, and it's interesting. I feel like there's this almost watershed moment in this podcast, in that a lot of the discussions we've had are around the power and the opportunity of technology, and
Yeah.
now we're talking a little bit about the responsibility of technology, and it's no different than if you have a car, right? Like, you have certain responsibilities. You
Yeah.
need to pay attention. You need to put on your seatbelt. You need to turn on your windshield wipers when it's raining and your headlights at night. So there are things that we could do. But to your point, having my phone next to me, and yes, I have the opportunity to access information from around the globe, to, take pictures, to buy things, and tap and pay and all these things. But also, you know what? I just need to be cognizant of the fact that that access provides, or demands, a little bit of accountability and responsibility on my behalf as well. And so, I think as consumers and users, asking a few more questions is probably a good thing, right? Hey, this is data that people want from me. Why do you want it? How are you going to use it? If this is data that's being taken in certain ways, is it encrypted? Is it not encrypted? And just asking a few key questions to be more aware
Yeah.
of what's happening with our information.
Yeah, and great points. Last, or maybe like couple of years ago, I was into like automotive cybersecurity, and I don't want to take away from the point that users have some responsibility here, but in some cases specifically, where you're getting into, I don't know, possibly somebody else's car in the future, right? There is some level of responsibility that also lies on the service providers. So,
100%.
I mean, so far, you know, s- there was somebody who owned the car, right? And you usually would, that person in our head would be responsible for driving it, or if you are driving it, and then you are responsible. But how does that change when we are talking about like auto driving cars, where maybe you're calling it through Uber, or maybe you're calling it through uh, I don't know, some ride sharing service in the future, or from the OEMs directly. What I know for a fact, at least for a long time in the automotive space, since nothing was connected, the regulations were different, right? Like you needed to have like physical access to the car. So as a direct result, given that car manufacturing is a very low profit, or sorry, not low profit, low margin space, uh, security was kept at like, given that it's a cost, it was like, treated as such, right?
Okay.
But going forward, I feel like, as as we adopt technology, there is a risk involved. So that, so the compensation for that has to be commensurate with, you know, the higher level of risk now that everything is connected. The other day somebody was saying, "Hey, I have my Tesla, and I raised a service request, and the mechanic, as long as the car is outside, they can just get into it, do anything they want, and leave, and not even talk to the owner." So from a service perspective, that's amazing. But what does that mean when somebody else wants to do something to your car, right? So things are evolving. The risk has drastically changed, but have the controls risen? Are controls being considered to match the level of risk? Like, that's something I think users need to think about, and I guess talk to their providers and figure things out.
Yeah, this is why the design, designing the security and the sort of risk prevention, all of that has to happen into the design. This I think that we're probably in a stage or phase, and we talked a little bit about this with Ashutosh around the sort of procurement of AI technologies for companies. And I think that what we need to see on the front end from these companies that are building the technology is to integrate those checks and balances, so that once it gets to the consumer, or it gets to the company that's going to use this tech, there's going to hopefully already be filters in place, and then you can add more. But I really think that the expectation that users are going to, or consumers are going to be the ones that are going to be like, "Hey, company, you didn't protect my data." Yeah, that sure, we could all do that, but that's something that companies should be thinking about right from the get-go. So I think that there is the design principle, of, design from the first mile, that has to be real, even in this case. And I think that hopefully with that, um, consumers will get a safer product at the end, or will engage with a safer product at the end. Well, on that note, I think that wraps. This is a wrap, folks. We will see you on our next episode.
Thanks,
Phil.
all.